Hi, and welcome to Monday Mornings, George Nordhaus. And we're going to have a presenter on today we've had before, and I'll probably continue to have because he's the number one guy in risk management that I know. Rob Ekern of CR Ekern and Company over in Arizona, as a matter of fact, but he's all around the country. He's going to talk about something called buyer urgency, the key to selling larger accounts. And well, I'll tell you about that in just a minute. Let me tell you about Rob here. Now, Rob is been around for quite a while. He reminded me the other day that we've been working together for 35 years or so. I remember when he was just an agency owner getting started and early on, and he was quite successful in the Dakotas, I believe, wasn't it, Rob? Weren't you?
Well, that's right, George. And as you can see, I've still got my hair 40 years later.
Well, we don't want to go there. Okay, but you worked for Willis, one of the big guys. But then he began to be a consultant, and he consults with some really nice sized agencies. And he results on and brokerages really, and you could see up to 2 billion in commission. Wow, boy, that's something. Those you must have one heck of a lot of really good clients, as I know you do. And then when he did one before for us, I learned something. I didn't really know what T-Core was, total cost of risk, and I learned a lot from that. Well, Rob and I were talking not too long ago, and we started talking about data and how the data is used these days in the commercial lines uh, uh, business, and it's needed a sense of urgency. And I didn't know what he was talking about. So, Rob, take us there, will you?
Well, George, thanks. And as always, it's nice to visit with you. And yeah, we go back to the days of me owning a small insurance agency in the frozen tundra, listening to those Nordhaus IMMS tapes years ago. So
Oh
thanks,
boy,
George.
watch out! You're dating me. Go ahead.
Well, here's kind of what's gone on in our business over the course of the last number of years. You know, as agents and brokers, we were really never taught to create a sense of urgency. Now, every other selling business that you can think of, the sales process is around finding and discovering a buyer's sense of urgency. In other words, why does this buyer really want to do business with us, and how do we cultivate that? In our business, that's something that we were never really taught because we never had to create it. We never had to create the need for a product. It was always mandated. We never have to set a time frame for a decision because it was always artificial, based around expiration dates. And, many agents over the years were taught to work a process, which was around the delivery of the product.
Mm-hmm.
Well, more and more and more agents and brokers are working on a broker of record letter basis and appointment than ever before. And none of that revolves around the process of X dates or actually the date of when the product is mandated.
Mm-hmm.
George, in our history, and I'm going to go back, prior to 1985, I was taught in selling, sales scripts and taught a lot of presentation closes, and all of that was very, very good. I'm not saying that hasn't been a big part of selling going forward, but it was sales manipulation, and that's what we were taught prior to about 1985. Some of the folks, may never have been part of that. Then, between about 1985 and roughly 2010, what we were taught was to work processes with a buyer, to do risk management surveys, to do needs analysis, to sit and to walk through all kinds of, analysis and that type of thing. And let me ask, your listeners this. When was the last time that you were able to call a larger buyer and have them actually agree to sit down for an hour or 2 hour process that you wanted to work? Chances are never. And that's because in today's world now of the buyer's thought process, they want to know before they'll invest any time with you is what's going to be in it for me. How is it going to help me run my business? Now we're talking the world of analytic-based or financial outcomes. And it's those financial outcomes that successful agents and brokers are moving forward with because it just doesn't work anymore. And when you talk to younger brokers, and I'll spend a lot of time with younger people, and these are people that may have come into our industry from a different industry, and they may have been very good salespeople, and they come into our industry and they have a real difficult time in bridging the gap from being someone who was in the business solutions business, moving backwards into someone who's strictly in the insurance business. So, that's how selling has changed.
Well, that was, I want to say something. That's one of the best slides I've seen. I mean, that should be on the wall of every agency.
George, it's all true, but the issue for many agents and agencies, and I don't want anybody to take this the wrong way, they've never been taught this. Sometimes they'll go back to their offices after they, maybe might not have been as successful as they wanted to be, and they'll say, well, geez, what happened? Or they'll go and they'll call on a larger account or any commercial account that they want to write, and they run into the wall around, well, what insurance carriers do you want to use? Our X date is this particular time. So business itself has moved up to the next level, and a business of any size is now using analytics and metrics. So, here's the key selling point and what we now have called analytic brokerage, which is, our trademark and our program. It's knowing the buyer's sense of urgency. Now, notice I didn't say uncovering the buyer's sense of urgency, because to uncover means that you have to actually look really, really hard to find it. Buyers of any commercial or not-for-profit account have a sense of urgency that already exists. And it's usually not about the insurance. So, we're being taught and have been taught to create, what is today a false sense of urgency, to set up a confrontational sale. And, that confrontational sale is, we're better than that guy. We do more than that guy. Our insurance company does more than that insurance company. That doesn't resonate with the buyer. Not when every single prospect already has a shared sense of urgency. And if it's a business, it's an improved business performance. That's what they care about. And if it's a not-for-profit, it's increased constituent service. That's it. So when we go out and we call on some of these accounts and we make it about something, I'm sorry to tell you folks, that the buyer really doesn't care about much anymore. It's a sad thing to say, but those of you that are calling on larger accounts or any commercial accounts, especially you younger folks, that's true. Knowing their sense of urgency. And their sense of urgency is always around their business results. So our focus has got to be to go out and have an initial business conversation with the buyer that focuses on their outcome. And we're not selling them anything. It comes down to asking the questions of what are they looking to achieve next year in their profit margins? How much are they looking to invest next year, perhaps in, new vehicles or new buildings or, whatever it is they're looking to do. Now, the fancy word for that is CapEx. Now, if you're talking to a big CFO, you've got to use that term. If not, it's something else. But it's interesting, George. I saw that Sprint, if people go on and they look at Sprint telephone company on the web, they're going to see their ad talks about improving the buyer's CapEx.
What is it? I don't know. I never heard
Capital,
of it.
Well, it's just a fancy word for how much money they're going to spend in their budget to buy and acquire things they need to grow. It's called capital expenditures.
Thank you.
And every CFO uses it. And the telephone companies use it. You mean the telephone companies are smarter than we are?
Probably.
The conversations that we have to have are around margins, investments, shareholder value. The biggest the biggest equity that most privately held companies have are the shareholders' value. So it's already there. It's already there. So what we need to do in our sales process is manage those expectations to whatever their sense of urgency is. If you're working with a new prospect and you ask them, what are you looking to do next year? And they'll tell you that they want to add 0.5% to their profit margins, which is frankly how many of them talk.
Mm-hmm.
They've given you the answer to the test. They've already told you what it is that you need to do. Insurance doesn't do that. Okay?
Right.
Now, if you're working with them, they begin to see you in a different light, and it allows you to actually move them into a project with you. And what's the project? The project is showing them how you're going to provide them with, in this case, that extra 0.5 point, or in the case of a buyer who says, I need $50,000 because I want to buy 3 new vehicles next year. That's what your sale becomes about, how you can help them get that. Now, there's a real foreign concept to a lot of agents, but what I can tell you is this is how you sell larger accounts. So what we want to be able to do, and we're going to show you in a second, just kind of what some of the generalities are there. You know, it's about improving their business. It's about facts. It's not about some pie in the sky conversation around, well, we maybe do this or we maybe do that. It's actually taking their results, and this is not highly complicated. It's just something that agents need to learn because they've never been taught. And then presenting their sales presentation back in what would be called decision support inside of that buyer's business. Now, I know some guys maybe, thinking the wheels are turning. But folks, if you're going to be in this business in 5 years and you don't know how to do this, you're going to get run over by the people that already are. So, if we're going to sell this way, here's what you've got to have. First thing is a consistent message around the client results in their language. And what I mean by that is you have to be able to translate what you do onto their financial outcomes. And again, you're not looking to be a high-level business consultant here, but it's called ROI. And the only ROI that many of us have had for years is what was our premium this year versus last year against your receipts. That doesn't cut it anymore. Then you've got to have a way to do it on a consistent basis that you can replicate from one account to the other, because without that, you could maybe do this one time, but you can't do it 20 times. And then you've got to have credible data, which gives you the ability to do it. And those are the things, in our world, George, you're seeing the brokers and agents that are grasping this. They're moving right up to the next level, and they're doing it quick because they realize that they got all of their buyers are now, many of them are starting to ask them about these things. And if they don't do it, they're losing their relevancy to their buyers. So, again, this may seem like pie in the sky, but it's here, and it's here now.
Okay.
So, I kind of wanted to give folks at least some thoughts on this. And this is the sales message that analytic brokers use. And it's something that our clients, they can change it a little bit, but it starts out with, well, what do? We help you reduce your costs and improve your productivity and your EBITDA, which is a fancy word for profits.
I'm sure they never thought about that before. Excuse me for interrupting, but I'm sure they don't get approached by, we'll help you with EBITDA and improve your productivity. I mean, I never heard an agent do that.
Well, and what's happening with our clients is they're going in and having this discussion. That's exactly what the CFOs and the buyers are saying to them is, this is the first time I've heard this. This is different. This is what I've wanted.
Yeah, it really is.
I mean, if you think about selling, George, that's really what the end game is here. We're not out selling insurance policies. We're selling outcomes to buyers. So, here's the how.
The how is really great. I love that.
Yeah, we find and we attack the financial leakage that currently exists inside your business model. Now, what that means is we're not talking about, your rate of insurance went from this to that. I mean, that's the smallest piece. What we know is that financial leakage is generating anywhere from 1/3 to 50% of a client's costs. So, and where that comes about is some of the data that we have to be able to actually show the buyer, here's how much this is costing you aside from the insurance. and the why or the payoff for the buyer is thereby providing you the benefit of the wasted capital that can be used to improve your growth. Now that's a message that at the very, very, very highest level resonates, and with a few changes in words, it resonates to any buyer. But you better be able to do that. That's why I don't mind sharing this with people, because there's folks out there that copy stuff and they put their words on it, and but if you can't do it, you better not talk about it.
Wow. I'm gonna really get that from now on. I think every agency ought to memorize that.
Well, they can, but they better be able to do it.
Yep, that's for sure.
See, George, there's the difference between the world that agents and brokers were in 5 years ago and the world they're in today. They have the ability to do this, but they don't. But they have to have the data to do it, and they have to understand the business language, and all of this has to come together. For an agent to say that, and then not back it up with anything other than insurance rates, they're going to get in trouble, because the buyer's going to say, you promised me this, what happened? So here's kind of what this is all about. If you work this way, you better stay consistent in the approach, because if you deviate from it, it looks like a trick, and you'll never get a second chance. The buyers, the first time they hear this, they're a little skeptical, because they've been kind of misled for years by people that came out and promised things and promised that, and at the end of the day, they found out that the broker was at the whim of the insurance carrier. This is really about the brokers and agents creating value inside of their organization. So what we talk about is that the discussion has to start on the other side of what I'll call the perception wall. Many agents and brokers are still using the approach that we were taught in 1975. We were. I mean, I hate to say it, but we were. And younger people that are coming in, they're going, wow, I came out of a different industry, and you mean you're trying to get me to sell that way? But what happens is it all gets deflected. But when you start on the other side of the wall with the right conversations and then being able to prove it, that's how broker of record letters are taken. And I've got a great story I'll just tell you quickly. And it was, I admit it was a very large account, but it's a story that, may resonate. We have a client of ours that was calling on a large account. It was, it was a very large account of over 6 figures in income. And they were talking to the CFO, and the CFO was responding, and then they brought in their team, and they showed the CFO all the value-added services that they could provide the CFO, and he stopped returning phone calls because they looked and they sounded like every other insurance agent and broker with value-added services. So I said, look, change your language. So they did. They called the CFO. They said, we may not have understood what we were looking at. Our firm is really designed to help you improve your EBITDA and reduce costs and find the financial leakage, and we're prepared to prove it to you because it appears to us right now with our initial analysis, there's close to $2 million that's leaking off your financial statement today.
Wow.
That CFO gave them everything they needed, signed the non-disclosure, and 2.5 months later gave them the broker of record letter for
Wow.
a 6-figure income account.
Ooh.
Now, we have other stories that aren't that large. We have a client that was calling on an ambulance company. A nice sized account. I mean, it was 20 to 30,000 of income, and they went in and they met with the buyer, and the buyer said, "Well, we want you to bid our insurance, and what markets do you want?" And the whole drill. And they said, "I'm sorry, we don't work that way. What we're here to do is to help you improve your margins, to improve your profitability, to provide show you financial leakage, and we just can't do that and bid your insurance." So they left. 20 minutes later, they got the call on the cell phone as they were driving back to the office, and it said, "We've decided to appoint you as the broker." They went back and they gave them the BOR based upon the conversation. So this is real, and firms that get with this sooner than later will be happier for it.
Great, I love it.
Well, here's what happens, and I just if you give me another minute or so, we'll just kind of talk about this. What's happening is we're calling on buyers, and the buyer wants insurance. Of course they do. They want the right price. Of course they do. And they want business improvement. They do. But they want you to work a certain way to get that. You, though, as a broker, want to demonstrate your impact on the buyer's business goals, because what you know is if you get sucked into the insurance and the price and all that discussion, you're just one of everybody else, and you want to work that way. So here's what the sales process is. Very simple. You just find out what you both agree on.
Wow.
That the buyer shares with you, with a non-disclosure agreement, what they're trying to achieve in their business. You ascertain what that is, and then determine where their financial leakage is outside of the insurance policies. Because you're going to be appointed as a broker of record or an agent of record or whatever term, what people say, don't quote. Well, of course, but if you're not going to quote, what are you going to do? So that's really, what people that want to sell with a sense of urgency and be of value to a business, that's what they do. So, I know I've laid a lot of things on you here, George, and, as always, I really, enjoy our conversations. But I wanted to leave your folks with, five thoughts.
Okay.
The first is you got to change your language. You got to change your language to that of business and results. And you don't need to be a business consultant, but we talk about the fact that we understand the client's business in many cases. No, we don't. We understand how insurance fits into their business. If you know what I'm saying.
Sure.
I mean, so we got to at least understand what they're trying to achieve. Then the next thing we've got to understand is how we can impact it. How we can impact their margins and their profits and their valuation and even, their CapEx or investments that they're going to make the next year, because that's our sales deliverable to them. Not that we're a better insurance agency than the next guy, but that we can move your margins. Then we got to know how to do it, how to work with not just loss costs, but projects and consultations. And I would say that's one of the things that probably more and more agents are coming to in a hurry, is the understanding that they've been giving away all of these services. It can be as simple as and I'll use a marketing project for an example. A marketing project is when you have your own renewal and you're taking it out to the marketplace and you're negotiating that with carriers. Well, you got to be able to show a buyer what that value was of that, because, a consultant charges them for it. So agents and brokers have all kinds of projects that they do, but they don't have the validation of knowing the data. Then the last one, if you're going to work this way, you got to have real data, because you can't just make this stuff up now that it exists. And if you make it up, and somebody who's really got it, you're gonna be, you're not gonna look very good at it. And I love the quote of Dr. Deming. It's now our company motto. Dr. Deming, of course, as you know, was one of the great thinkers of the 50s and 60s, and he said, without data, you're just another person with an opinion.
So true.
And how many times are we just people with opinions attempting to compete with other people with an opinion?
Rob, as I look at this, I understand exactly where you're going. I think it's going to change agents. I think there are a lot of people out there who are going to change their way of doing business on commercial lines. But when I look at it, I see, how do I know? I learned all about insurance. I went to do it. I'm a CPCU, and I know all that kind of stuff. How in the world am I going to learn about how to do it, figure out the impact on business results, the margins, the profits? How can I do that? I mean, you're trying to make me into a business. I don't know. I mean, it's difficult.
Well, it is difficult. George, the biggest issue is that, and I don't want anybody to be upset with this, but sometimes we don't get out of our own way. If we've been so focused for years on simply the insurance coverages, for the older folks, it's a hard transition. For the younger folks, it's not. But it involves, learning this, and I, without being self-serving, this is all we've been doing for 18 years, as you know, is teaching people this. But the thing that you have to understand is, first, grasp the concept of, what business are you in? Are you in the business of providing insurance policies? Yes, that's something that you do, but so does everybody else. Are you in the business of improving a buyer's business performance? George, and I'm going to, just for a minute, our business hasn't changed since for 350 years. Isaac Newton wrote his theory on gravity a year before Lloyd's coffee shop opened.
Wow.
And our business hasn't changed for 350 years. It's still about rate, price, and terms. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And what I can just share with you is that firms that are now working this way are, how we're talking is how anybody and everybody is going to work if they're going to stay in the game. And it's going to require that they have a little bit of growth inside their organization. But again, that may sound self-serving, but these are some of the things. If people do want to, learn more about it, they can go to our website at tcorcalc.com, and they can read a couple of the e-zines. And if they have an interest in learning more, they can contact us, or they can read the book.
They should. I wish they would, because I mean, this is. I'm being awfully quiet because I'm learning. I'm sinking it all in. That, God, what this must do for retention.
Oh, and new business. It's 100% BOR, because what's happening is, if you're maturing the prospect correctly with business issues, and then you have the data to show the buyer how you're going to change it, you don't need to wait for an expiration date. That's just the time that the contract renews. But a client's costs are leaking from their financial statement 365 days a year. So, I guess, I know I'm sounding very excited about this, but one of the things we've done recently, as you know, we've only worked primarily with very large firms, but we now have developed a program for a firm of any size.
Good.
Who really wants to work this way and learn it and translate it down to the size of their organizations. And we can do that now because of cloud computing.
Where can they see that? Is that TCorCalc?
That's on tcorcalc.com. If they go on that and they read a couple of the what's called e-zines where it talks about it, and they click Contact Us, they'll be contacted with information on what it's all about, and then they can choose if it's something that is right for their firm.
Well, Rob, this is
So,
fantastic. I mean, it's a wonderful presentation. I think it's going to change lives, and it must make you feel awfully good to know that you're going to change lives. It makes me feel good to be able to bring this to people, because I'm really, if I sound excited, it's because I'm excited. I just didn't have any idea. This is the beautiful thing there, that buyer urgency. What you've done here is just above and beyond. So I hope people will follow up with you. I hope they'll take this to heart. I certainly, if I were going to be going into the insurance business these days, I would start there, I think, maybe, and go from there. So, Rob, let me, on behalf of the entire industry, let me thank you.
well, that's very kind of you, George. And every time we do this, I say the same thing back at you, buddy. So thanks for
Okay.
everything you've
Well, let's
done.
keep doing it for another 20 years, and we'll make it good. And
Attaboy,
it'll still,
attaboy. And I'll still have my hair, George.
shut up. I'll see you next Monday morning.